Hello, my friends. Nick Libretti here for jrcigars.com. Welcome to another tremendous episode of the Long Ash Podcast. Now, I'm doing an intro, which means that we have a guest, because I don't do that with Chris. He doesn't need an intro. He's just there. Doing a great job, but he's just there. But today we have a very special guest, one of our longest recurring guests. I think this might be the record of times we've had him on the show, which means that either we're doing something right or he's not. So we'll see what goes on. But please welcome the immensely talented, the world-renowned Michael Herklots of Ferio Tego. Michael, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. Happy to be here again, man.
Are you?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Although
That makes one of us.
I think you led with it's an impressive show, but we haven't done anything yet. And so we're really setting the bar high.
Yeah, but like we always hit the bar high, and then we disappoint our fans, and then they comment on it, and like it's just it's the kind of a.
Then why don't you just start
relationship.
commenting now how great it is?
I mean, it's literally, as Terrence would say, it's the greatest day of our lives.
Greatest day of our lives.
I love how he has his own slogan. I really do. So how is it going, Mr. Michael?
You know, we are entering Ferio Tego's 4th year in market, and I think I've said it multiple times. I don't think there was another brand that's been on the market for 4 years that's been able to do the amount we've done in the time that we've done it. It's just been a very exciting.
Well, I've said
period.
this before. I mean, when I remember, I don't know if Chris remembers it, but I remember when we kind of heard everything about Nat Sherman, back in because I was doing interviews with you for Nat Sherman, online during COVID, and I remember when hearing like, oh, Nat Sherman's, no more, et cetera, et cetera. And I was talking to, I think it was Chris and maybe Greg, our other videographer at the time, and some of the buying team. And I'm like, this guy is a #1 draft pick. Like whatever he decides to do is going to be like, it's going to be like a big deal where he goes. Thinking like, if you went to Davidoff or if you went to whoever you went to, it was going to make an immediate impact. So seeing you taking your years of knowledge in the retail side, in the manufacturing side, in the brick and mortar side, and the marketing side, and be like, hey, me and Brendan are just going to start my own company. I know how to do everything now. I know every single aspect of how to do it. So yeah, you were able to make this immediate impact. When you see other newer brands, it's somebody like, oh, he really knows tobacco, but like no idea about the branding side or distribution or how to get in someone's stores. You were experienced at every single important level. So you were able to just hit the market running, which is really impressive.
As convincing as that sounds, having the good fortune of have worked for so many great companies for as many years as I did, if I'm being completely honest and transparent, I was not as convinced with that subset of data that you just rolled out as other people were. And I know I've shared this before, but when it was time to look for something new, hearing what you just shared expressed to me by so many of my friends and leaders and peers in the industry was what was so overwhelmingly reassuring that, you know what, I am prepared to do it and it is my time to do it, and let's just go all in. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's always going to be the internal skepticism. I've taken on an almost completely new role this year that, Big Jim has tasked me with things I had never done before, never studied for, didn't even have a basic understanding of. And there was a lot of bumps along the way, but 8 months later, I'm able to do them, like a lot of logistics work and that kind of stuff. But the entire time I'm doing it, I was thinking like, I don't know if I should be doing this. I don't know anything about this part of the business. What am I going to do? And Jim's like, just trust me, it'll come to you. So I understand that, like, when you're entering a new world and you think like, I'm not prepared, like, hey, how am I going to compete with these big guys? But when everyone's like, no, we've seen what you've done. We've seen what you've done up to this point.
Yeah, but
you have all the pieces.
The mentality of an artist, regardless of how confident you are in your work, always leans towards the fear of whether people are going to love it. And whether you're going to be successful and make a living at it. And that fear is you have a relationship with that fear when you're young, when you're an up and coming artist. take all the risks in the world. Who cares? That fear is very different when you're married with 2 kids in a
Yeah,
beautiful
absolutely.
house, and you have to go all in, or you find a job working for someone else. But man, all of that is in the past. We made the leap. Ferio Tego is in market. We're growing. We've expanded, certainly within the United States, with tremendous success. We've also expanded to the UAE. We've expanded to Asia, and we just expanded to
I
Canada.
saw the article on Half Wheel. Congratulations.
Yeah. So it's, but we're also, I remember having a conversation with you very early on about, where's Ferio Tego going? And I remember expressing then, and I express the same today, our growth approach is really a thoughtful and deliberate one.
Right.
We're not taking this meme approach of just doing something new, dropping something new. Here's a new single. Check this thing out over here. I have something over here. This one's limited. This one's limited. They're all limited. Oh my God, there's so much new stuff.
Yeah.
What are we building that way? We're building Ferio Tego. And to do that, we're not doing it with sticks. We're doing it with bricks. And that means that we have to lay that foundation strong. And once we're on it, we have to stand on it. And we have to make sure it's firm. We have to tell our story over and over and over again. We have 3 brands, 12 blends. That is a pretty comprehensive portfolio
Yeah.
for any brand or company to have, especially when you divide it across 3 different countries. And, it's a lot. And I'm really proud of that. We don't need new. We need to keep playing our hits over and over, because every time you play a hit, somebody else hears it and says, man, that's great. And then they discover it and they share the hit. And when they do, they're not sharing a new version. They're sharing exactly the same version they fell in love with. To me, that is the North Star of Ferio Tego's growth.
So first of all, Mike, if you ever want to get out of this industry and become either like a cult leader or a motivational speaker, I think you'd make even more money, because this is the second time I've been talking to you today. We had a training earlier, and you had people in that room who have never smoked a cigar, like on the edge of their seat, ready to just go. So for if any reason you want to get out of this industry, start a cult, start writing Tim Robbins. You speak way better than like Tony Robbins does. So just know that you have that in your back pocket. But yeah, I mean, listen, I try to talk to as many different industry leaders and characters as possible. And there is this feeling with some people who have been in the industry a while, but maybe they don't have kind of the pedigree or the heritage that others do. And they feel like, hey, I don't want to be doing these limited editions. I hate having to do this. But we see like, the problem is once you start in that world,
that becomes the brand.
It becomes the brand. And so it's like, all right, this year, we're just, instead of doing 5 LEs, we're just doing 1 and we're going to focus on core. You're going to see a noticeable drop in sales. But because since when you started, you never had that add-on piece of like crazy LEs, you're able to grow it naturally. Now it's tough for a company that's been doing 4 or 5 LEs every year to like, hey, for this year, we're not going to do that, because it's going to hurt them. In the short term, it's going to hurt them.
Look, there are lots of big brands that depend on those spikes that are programmed out throughout their year. And big brands can sustain those spikes because the brands are already big.
Right.
For new brands that depend on those spikes, they haven't built the foundation, I think. Now, I say that, and there are lots of great examples of lots of brands that have had very successful runs as these limited edition things. But, just look at where we are today. 5 years ago, we entered into a period of time where people were buying anything, and everyone was paying a lot of attention because people had time on their hands, and there was just this dynamic engagement of industry because people were on their porches, smoking 5 cigars a day and, phoning it into work. And so they were really living their hobby full time. But that's not the way hobbies work as much as we would love for them to.
Yes.
And so that means that you start paying less attention. And that's the perfect moment where you're you want to be risk averse. You know, it's no different. You know, there was think of everything that happened in the last 5 years. You had all these different limited editions. Booze went up, and every brand jumped into the ring in bourbon, and everyone jumped in with tequila. The crypto went crazy. You know, all of these things that required um, dr- intense attention, minute by minute. But that's because people were living their hobby live. Today, hobbies are a hobby again, and it does not have that uninterrupted attention for every move from every place. And so things get missed. And that's why I feel so passionately about building the brand and the blends within the brand, because they were the same 5 years ago as they are today, as they will be 5 years from now. And we, especially today, we want things that are a sure thing. Number one. And number two, as consumers, we want to win. We, even whether it's expensive or not, from a dollar perspective, is there value there from an experience perspective? And for me, if I look at the Ferio Tego lineup, we go from $7 to $24. But I can tell you, from 7 to 24, we are punching so far over our weight in experience and time spent relative to money spent than other brands and blends that are 2 or 3 or 4 times the price.
No, I completely agree. And you bring up a really interesting point. You know, the limited edition portion of this industry, you know, been around since maybe like the mid 2000s, you know, probably even before that. I think you really saw that with Pete and what he was doing. But you know, you can even make an argument for like Fuente in the 90s, but really mid 2000s kind of when it started. When I was started in the industry in 2009, 2010, like our store, we didn't carry any of that. Maybe on the website we did, but like it was not as big of a deal. Started gaining a little steam, you know, a couple of the trade shows, but it was still, there was a lot of new brands at that time, you know, 2014, 15. So they were trying to get their kind of core lines out. But since COVID, I mean, if you were, and I'm sure we can have somebody, one of our analytics departments actually like put this together, the increase in so-called LEs from 2020, you know, even into, you know, 2021 really, to now has to be 10, 20, 30% increase. I just see it every single, a new core line is announced within 6 months. Oh, and they're also bringing out an LE, you know, just for the West Coast. And oh, they're also bringing out this LE.
Well, and arguably even the number of quote core lines,
Yeah,
is staggering. But everything is a story. Every blend is a story that has to be told by a retailer.
right.
And retailers, listen, I spent 20 years in a humidor dealing with consumers as part of my life. And so I know, and I empathize with retailers. I know the pressure, especially when you feel it from vendors, of why aren't we selling more? Well, no one's asking for it. Well, why aren't they asking for it? Well, because they haven't heard about it. Well, how do they hear about it? Well, it's your job to tell them. Well, it's not my job to tell them as a retailer.
Right.
You know, I get one story to tell. I don't have 30 stories to tell. And so we're trying to be very thoughtful about making sure that we're not introducing more stories to learn,
Right.
rather than just keeping the same story front of mind. Telling a new story and telling a new story and telling a new story and telling a new story. You're not remembering
Right.
the real story, the full story. The Ferio Tego portfolio is a full story, and you just tell the chapter that you like the best. But it's not something that you have to go relearn. It's something that then can be shared and retold. As long as we're staying consistent, and as long as the retailers are committed to being good partners, then part of honoring that partnership is not overloading them
Right.
with new material.
Right. getting an email every other week, like, oh, by the way, we have a new thing, only 5,000 boxes. Do you want some?
Yeah, it's just
Well, like,
even the
tell me
expansion that
about
we've
it.
done.
Like, what? First of all, this is why I very much like your approach. When you have something new, like the Suma, we didn't get an email being like, oh, new Ferio Tego Suma, you guys want some? You came in because I think we even did a podcast about it, and you were like, here's why this cigar is important. Here's the full story. The amount of emails we get from manufacturers, like, oh, you want this new thing? Well,
but also available now.
Yeah.
Like I have two rules. Number one, we don't send press releases based on ideas. That drives me bananas. And I know it's supposed to like tease and pique interest and make people want it even more. But as a retailer, it's so difficult to deal with that from a consumer when you have someone who says, hey, do you have such and such? No, it doesn't exist yet. It was just a press release. Oh, but you think that person's really going to put it in their calendar to
No,
check
they're gonna
back in
forget.
6 months?
I do the same thing. Whenever we do a press release, I'll do it the day before it goes
Right.
on sale.
It's ready now.
Right.
Shipping now. Let's go. Rock and roll.
Right.
That I forget what the second thing was. I had a second thing. I'll come up with it in a minute.
It's all right.
But I don't want to have a long line in the water. You know, I want to throw the bait and know that I can land the fish. I'm not throwing the hook and then waiting to bait it.
I mean, to me, it absolutely makes sense. And if I was building my own cigar brand right now, this is how I would want to operate it. But in this day and age, like you're kind of unique in your thinking. I think a lot of people would strive to kind of run it that way. I think that because they already got hooked into this, like everyone, like the only, a lot of 50% of our sales are coming just from new stuff. They're not willing to take that risk now of, hey, we're going to do a year of no new stuff, build our core back up, and then maybe in a year and a half we'll release another smaller new, because they're going to see an immediate hit. But like I said, this touches back into how I think COVID changed the industry in the immediate. But there were some people who knew that long lasting where this was going to kind of settle, and there was people who thought it was going to go on forever. What is your kind of opinion on how the industry has changed and then course corrected in the 5 years since COVID?
I think it's kind of like the pop cycle versus the art and creative cycle. The pop cycle is creative artists that start coming up with their own voices and ideas, but then enough people kind of do it, perhaps inspired by each other, that goes from creative art to becoming pop. And then that gets hooked into this machine that creates this artistic pop to become mainstream. And now everyone starts copying the behavior and copying the rhythm and the cadence and in the case of music, the song form, all of these things where now all of a sudden everything is releasing the same, everything sounds the same, everyone looks the same, and all of that just keeps building and building and building itself. But in the meantime, if you're paying attention to the artistic creative side, the greatest artists have already abandoned that and are working on completely new stuff that sounds different, looks different, feels different. And while all the mainstream world is now spinning this manufactured art in a large scale way, they're not paying attention to what's changing underneath them until it shifts.
Right.
And then when it shifts, you have the largest, which is funny, the largest are the ones that get caught off guard, but that's because everyone has planned so far in advance and have anchored themselves over here.
Right.
And then boop, it switches. And I think we're in a moment right now where things have switched underneath the feet of a lot of large thinking entities. And once again, the smaller, more thoughtful artists are really getting some spotlight right now.
Right.
The problem is that spotlight is difficult to shine when we're also facing a once in a generation or so situation of pipeline constipation.
Yeah.
If you look at what happened over 5 years, and it's happened in every industry: beer, booze, sneakers, watches. We've seen it all happen the same way in the last 5 years. Demand went up, supply, whether it was from supply chain or from just higher demand, was diminished. Then, as demand continued to rise, then you had this increase in production to meet this new demand. And then eventually that plateaued and demand started to diminish just back to a lower level, higher than it was, but lower than the peak. But now the companies have shifted and gotten used to these larger volumes, larger infrastructure, more employees, higher production, and so they keep it going. And so now, how do you keep it going when consumption has declined slightly?
Right.
Then you have to make deals that are unpassable.
Right.
So then there's another push. It's that final push for one more touchdown when you're at the 2-yard line and everyone just stuffs and stuffs and stuffs until it gets over. But now what? Because now the consumers have taken every deal they can possibly take and they can't take anymore. Now the retailers are stuffed to the gills and they can't take anymore. Every aging room everywhere is at capacity, and you got factory floors with rollers waiting for orders. That's a scary place to be.
Yeah.
But that's where I think a company like ours, it gives Ferio Tego an opportunity to show the business case and the reason for why it's worth making room for us. And that's because what fills many humidors around the country, consumers' humidors, retailers' humidors, and aging rooms in factories, are basically their version of the same 12 songs. And I've used this analogy before, maybe here. We're an industry of covers, and everyone, just like it's the pop cycle. If this is the model and this is what people want, and everything needs to be big and box pressed and strong and Nicaraguan and $50 and above, and everyone has done that stuff, now it's just machine made pop.
Right.
For Ferio Tego, we take an original artist approach. The work matters. The flavor matters. The song matters to us. And if we do it right, then it's not a song that feels like a one-hit wonder. Our blends are not going to feel memorialized in this moment in time that was everyone was doing strong. Everyone was doing Ligero heavy. Everyone was doing $100. We have a brand called Timeless. You know how perfectly emblematic of Ferio Tego's philosophy. We are a timeless brand and company, and we're going to stick to what we do, and it's authentic. And you can look at any blend, any brand at any time that we have ever produced, and there's nothing pop about it. There's nothing trendy about it. It's just authentically and completely and genuinely Ferio Tego.
You got to write a book, Mike. You're killing me. It's every time. No, I fully agree. And what makes me mad, and I would imagine, I mean, I don't know if it would upset you, but as someone who worked in the industry, like kind of closer to when the boom was in, late 90s, early 2000s.
You calling me old, bro?
I'm calling you vintage.
That's even worse.
But the same exact thing happened.
Yeah, of course it did.
And it's one thing for younger people to not know the past, therefore they're doomed to repeat it. But there was people who I'm sure got caught up in this post-COVID, filling to the brim of their warehouses, thinking, oh, like we know that in 5 years it's going to be even, it's going to be another 10% up, and not remembering how cyclical these things can be.
So a couple differences in this round. First of all, price increases were very real. And the price increases at a baseline level, maybe not the top line consumer level, because I think at some point there is a threshold.
There is a ceiling of like, okay,
what's justifiable,
right?
But even then, you know what? I shouldn't even say that, because if you have the receipts, Like look at the most expensive timepieces in the world that are going for hundreds of thousands of
Yeah,
dollars.
Patek Philippe, those guys.
But you can have a master watchmaker who works for another company justify why that watch costs what it does.
Yeah.
The hours, the jewels, the complications, all that. You have to have receipts. And receipts come with equity, brand perception. So when I look at the overall, let's say, increase in prices, I mean, I can tell you the hinges for the Ferio Tego humidors for this box, they went up 300%, 400% on the early side. Shipping costs, and this is 2021, right? Very tough time to start a business.
Yeah.
From the time we started preparing and quoting prices to the time we actually received it, the shipping costs were 3x what they were when we started. No one has brought those prices down. Despite, it is what it is. So there are some increased fixed costs that have changed. There's also an increased perception of what things cost from a consumer. You know, that sweet spot middle, and we all live in the middle. I'd say most of us like to shop in the middle. That whole thing is lifted too. And so I don't think there's a lot of room to pull it back. But going back to the receipts, if you want to enter the market with your goal of being $100, $200, I believe as a consumer and just as a Christian who believes in honesty, you have to demonstrate why it's worth it.
Right.
And so what troubles me is when the justification for price is met with fairy tales. That to me is disappointing. That is the only tie back to the boom of the 90s. It's the fairy tales, Rumpelstiltskin turn straw into gold, turn new tobacco into old tobacco,
Right.
make a $2 cigar a $100 cigar. Why? Because it's the best. It's the aged. It's this. It's moon grown. It's, like all these ridiculous, you know what I mean? Like it's the fairy tale of marketing and there's no receipts. Look, I worked for Davidoff for many years. When I sold Davidoff limited editions or sold Davidoff at all, I knew that the equity and the honesty of the company was the credibility that defended me to sell that brand.
Right.
When we sell Ferio Tego today, Elegancia and Generoso is $24. But I can demonstrate why, and I can also show you like products at the same price or higher that don't deliver what we deliver. So I can stand behind our pricing because we can deliver receipts. I'll tell you who made it. I can walk you through the blends if it's important to you. But at the end of the day, this will tell you if it's worth it. And what I appreciate about this boom the most is that the factories had experienced, let me say, the older, more mature factories that had been through the first boom. They had seen this story before. They know what happens at the end, and they know that the shortcuts for short-term increase in volume have dramatic long-term ramifications when that product stays in market beyond the lifespan of that boom, and people start judging just on the merit and performance of the product relative to cost. And you saw a lot of brands spike and a lot of brands vanish between 1995 and 2005. In 2020, you saw the same demand, but you saw a lot of discipline from the most mature, respected factories to say, no, we're going to be backordered.
Right.
We are not going to cheapen the product or diminish the quality to meet the demand. And for those companies, those are the ones that you see today who are not begging for business, who are not blowing out brands, who are not radically discounting because they don't have to, because they were thoughtful and they stuck to their values. And even though Ferio Tego is not a mature company, I've been around long enough to now be the oldest young guy
Yeah.
in the room. I had the good fortune of learning from those people for the last 20 years, and that's not a mistake that we were willing to make either, nor were our factory partners.
Well, you work with, three of the most experienced. To be honest,
And respected.
yeah, the Camacho factory is probably like the least old factory you worked with, and it's one of the most, the largest, most respected. But then between Plasencia and Quesada, these are the top of the tip of the sword in terms of logistics, operations, factories, tobacco. Like these are, the elders, I would say, of this industry. So
It's tobacco first,
Yeah.
quality first, people first.
yeah,
You know,
because
I mean,
they don't have to. They have to care a little bit, but like the end results, not of the cigar, but of the brand, like how it was marketed or whatever. It's like the only thing that's going to come back on us is, was the cigar good? So you can have all the marketing tricks
and was it worth it?
Yeah, the crazy packaging and it's got gold in the band and whatever. But if you make too much and you start throwing in things in the filler that you really shouldn't, or it's too young and it's not done properly, it's gonna ruin it immediately, and then everyone's gonna look, oh, that's made at this factory. Man, that cigar, it used to be good, but now it stinks.
One of the
and
other
I've seen
things-
it. I've seen a lot of comments the past 2 years of like, oh, that cigar's not good anymore, like because they
Yeah.
did exactly what you said that they shouldn't be doing.
Well, two things. Let me go back to the that cigar's not good anymore piece. But first, I'll say one of the other significant increase in costs was the investment factories were making, particularly in Honduras and Nicaragua, in social responsibility and education and quality of life to keep their employees in the country where they work.
Because I heard there was like a mass exodus of out of Nicaragua specifically.
Of course, Nicaragua into Honduras, Nicaragua and Honduras into the United States. There was just a lot of people leaving, either just to leave their country or to come to the U.S. And so the factories were investing a lot in creating programs and education in demonstrating why they should stay and making it worth it for them to stay.
Right.
So I give them a lot of credit, and frankly, that's money. Those are people I want to work with. Those are real partners that I want to invest in. And if you're telling me that we have to go up X percent because you're taking part of that money and you're putting it back into education for kids whose parents work in the factory, and that's going to keep them local and increase their quality of life, that's great, man. That's stuff that I can get
Right.
behind. And that stuff, by the way, that's not marketed. And I give factories credit that they are not standing on soapboxes and patting themselves on the back for this stuff.
No.
Because, that is the age of 2024. Let's be generous with a hidden camera and watch me be, watch me be philanthropic to homeless people with pizzas. That's not generous.
And then immediately take the pizza back and give it to the next homeless
It's
guy.
it's unimpressive to me. But going to what you said, I smoked this 2 years ago and now I smoke it and it is no good. This is precisely why we are relentlessly committed to core. It's the same amount of time, energy, and money to create something new as it is to maintain something. In fact, I would argue it's even harder to maintain it than it is to create it, because the elements keep changing and yet you still have to create the same product and experience. And so sometimes when you smoke something and you remember enjoying it and now you don't, and you think to yourself, oh, my palate's changed and I don't like what I used to like, you're blaming the wrong person. It's not your fault as a consumer. It's the factory's fault. They've abandoned the commitment to consistency in favor of the commitment of new and shiny and hip and limited. And that's why, I love reading the feedback and I love reading reviews of our brands, because, we date back to the mid 90s on some of these brands and blends. And yet the consistency that I read the reviews, the tasting notes, the flavor notes, the experience, the way people break down thirds, it's so consistent in the way people share their experience that it reassures me that we are absolutely doing things right.
I would definitely agree. I'm smoking the 10-year, the timeless limited 10 years.
Bro, it's like a
Which
s'mores.
I think I smoked also last time you were here.
Oh, you might have.
And I'm getting that same No one is quite as spot on with you when it comes to not just the flavors. Flavors sometimes can be subjective. I mean, I think you probably read a half wheel review and then smoked that same cigar yourself. But the actual experience of smoking it, like you're gonna salivate and you're gonna feel it like on this part of the tongue. That's exactly what I got with the cigar the first time I smoked it a year ago. I think it was a year, maybe a year and a half, and now. And I remember that. I might not remember like, oh, and then it was like spicy 2/3 of the way through, and then this happened. But I remember the experience
Yeah.
of enjoying it, and that's consistency that is so important, so important. Whereas where I do like what you do with the Generoso and the Elegancia in that, not that it's you're trying to make it not consistent, but the consistency is in the procedure, not necessarily in the end result. Like we're gonna do things consistently, but it may slightly alter what you're gonna get on the back end. Is that correct? Like correct way of describing it?
Everything except Elegancia and Generoso would be like watching your favorite movie over and over.
Right.
If we're doing it right, there is nothing recognizably different than anytime you see it. You go and see a Broadway show, you go and see it the next day, unless you're really paying attention to every actor playing which character.
Right.
Phantom of the Opera is Phantom of the Opera.
Exactly.
That's core. The characters, the people playing the roles may change, but the show does not change at all. Elegancia and Generoso is a little more like seeing your favorite band live. Each year, you're experiencing us re-record that
Right.
idea. And now, once again, you may not recognize it if you smoke the 2022 Elegancia and now you smoke the 2023. But if you do them side by side, that's when you may notice,
You'll see the parallels.
and also those unique attributes
Right.
from one production to another. But for core, that doesn't exist. For Elegancia and Generoso, the spirit of those two experiences is a sort of artistic redo at what Elegancia and what Generoso means.
I think it's just such an interesting proposition, and I said this when we were first talking when you first came out with Elegancia, which by the way is still one of my favorite cigars in the industry each
smoking
and
one
every
now.
year. But it was such an interesting proposition in that consistency is such a kind of cornerstone of this industry that I mean, really with a lot of industries, a lot of kind of everyday industries, like McDonald's, it's going to be the same. It's got to be the same hamburger every single time. But your goal was not like consistency of it was consistency of experience.
Yeah.
Like we want you to enjoy it in the same way, but what you're enjoying might be a little bit different. Like
Yeah.
it's just it's kind of how like a chef looks, like a Michelin star chef. And I think even Bradley Cooper and whatever that movie he did when he was a chef, was it called Chef? Okay. Where he says that like a real chef does not look for consistency in like flavor. Like we actually like even if I make the same dish 2 nights in a row, it's gonna be a little bit different, but I want consistency of experience, which I don't know has really, at least not publicly, has been done in the cigar. No one else has come out and said like, this is how we see this brand. This is what we're doing with it each year. In fact, most brands are like, no, you're gonna get the same thing each year, day in, day out. It's gonna be taste the exact same. So it's such an interesting and unique and artistic way to kind of to put your brand out there in the market, and I think it's worked out tremendously. I really do.
Yeah, and I think that just comes back to mindset. I think artistically and I think musically, and I don't just think product or marketing or manufacturing. And so there's a forgiveness to artistic creativity in performance. And there's something consistent about that inconsistency that I think people look forward to. But it shouldn't be something radical. And it should just feel alive.
Right.
It should feel dynamic. Like Elegancia Generoso, even the Timeless 10. These are really dynamic stories. But it's more the consistency in the storytelling are the key moments. It's not necessarily where they hit on the clock,
Right.
you know? And if you look at like a McDonald's or food, there's when things are mechanized, that level of precision requires a sacrifice in um, in engagement
Right.
and the sense of being dynamic and living. Whereas if I tell you a story, and I've told you this story before, you're gonna say, "Bro, I love this story." Hopefully, you might
Yeah.
hate the story, but either way, all the parts of the story are gonna be the same. And when it gets done, you're gonna say, "I love that story." And the next time I see you and we have somebody new there, you're gonna say, "Hey, bro, tell that story," and I'm gonna tell it. The experience of the person who hears it for the first time will more or less be the same as the way you heard it. And maybe I told it better, or maybe I told it differently, but it's still the same story. That I think is the spirit behind, especially Elegancia Generoso. Some of the limiteds,
Mm.
like the TAA, for example, we do it every year, same blend, but I'm just telling the story again, and maybe I tell this version a little different this time than
Yeah.
I told it last time, or I emphasize this part more than I emphasized it last
Yeah.
time I told the story.
Yeah.
But at the end, the story's still the story, and you either like it or you don't.
Exactly. No, I really love that from someone who has a passion for the product, and I see a lot of brand owners who I know have a passion for a product just get caught up in the metrics and in the branding and in the marketing and in it's got to be like this. This is what everyone want. For someone to be like, this is what it is. I want to tell the story this way. I hope you enjoy it, and if you don't,
Well, and that's
you know.
listen, that is where the artist philosophy, for better or worse, comes in, and it's also where all of the fear comes in too, because obviously we make we create art to make people happy. We
Right.
want people to love it, but at the end of the day, we want the art to be an expression of ourselves. Whether you're a graphic artist, a musical artist, fine arts, whatever it is, you're creating as the artist, and you're creating your work as an extension of what you think and what you love and where you are in that moment. And in every industry, you can clearly see the the artist's work versus
The machines work. The
yeah, the
corporate machines work at the
exactly.
end.
And and look, at the end of the day, the machine art always sells more volume. Always. But the artist, I think, is always happier,
Yeah.
you know, because they're just doing what they love every day. Now, at the same time, they're also consumed by the feedback from people who don't like it,
Right.
and
Because it's so personal.
we often lose sight of just how many people who do. But that's when I think it's Rick Rubin, Rick Ross, Rick Rubin.
For Grubman, yeah. The producer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rick Rubin has
Rick
said,
Ross.
yeah, not Rick Ross. Rick Rubin, he's got this amazing book, and he's done a lot of podcasts talking about his book, and he always gets back to, he's got this line that says, the audience matters last to him. That he is, regardless of what he's working on or who it is, it's just about the art and about him and about the way it feels. And what's funny about Rick is he'll say, I can't play an instrument. I don't know how to use a board. He's got no applicable skill other than his ability to interpret what he hears and give guidance on what he thinks will make it better until it's something that is crafted in a way that he believes is the expression of him via whatever artist he's working with. And it's a lot of it's a lot of maturity as an artist, I think, to get to a point where you can kind of remove the audience through the process, do your best work, review it against your own values, and then come to the moment where you say, okay, this is ready to share, and then let it go.
Well, I think we're all certainly very happy that you've decided to share some of your stories with us, not just today on the show, but in terms of your product. I mean, it's really been in this kind of new post COVID era of cigars. I think Ferio has been one of the kind of flagship brands that, it's not like you got your start just because of COVID, but your this brand came about during that time. And as we enter this kind of new unknown of how is the industry going to transition and change and adapt over the next decade or so, I think Ferio is going to play an important part of that. Now, before we finish up here, because I got to say, as much as I love hearing you talk, I love to hear you talk over some food because I am starving. But let's talk about, you have a few new products that you just want to talk about, more like packaging and size. But please feel free to share what's
So
going
we
on.
have the current release of Ferio Tego is 2023.
Mhm.
So 2024 should start making its way in first quarter, first half of 25.
Mhm.
So again, following that wine model now, we hold back, we let it age and mature, and then roll it out in the following year for the previous vintage release. So those are on their way. We did also release the Ferio Tego Suma Toro, which I know you know, but I don't remember if we've talked about it here. But two new exciting things. First, our fresh packs, which we released these this fall in our timeless collection. This is the Ferio Tego, all four timeless in 6x50 Toro in a vacuum sealed fresh pack. There's humidity. We do this in partnership with Humidif Group, same company actually that makes our
Throw
humidors
boxes.
for Elegancia and Generoso. So there's a dual ply inside that's humidified, and then this is sealed and then resealable zipper. So that's all four of the Ferio Tego Timeless Collection in Toro 6x50.
It's a good looking fresh pack, man.
It's killer.
It's really good
Thank
looking.
you. And then we also have in our Metropolitan Host, which is very mellow, very smooth, too natural, too Maduro, which is a little bit more chocolatier. And then they both have that sweetness right when you put it to your lips. This is also in a 6x50. 6x50 is not available outside of this pack. So this is a new size called the Hudson. And so both of these are now available. That's the Timeless and Metropolitan.
Fresh packs have really blown up the past couple of years. I'm glad to see it.
It's such a helpful item, but
yeah,
but it's also, you once again, you can tell the pop from the art
right.
when you see a fresh pack. We really wanted to put a lot of thought into, granted it's art, but into color, into the window, to seeing the product, to
Right.
letting it speak for itself, to tell a story. We also have QR codes on both packaging
Super
to
smart.
make sure that you can find more information, not just about those blends, but about all the blends. And then finally, we just released Petites in Metropolitan. So in the Connecticut, let's do this in the right order. The Connecticut, the Maduro, and the Host, again, slightly sweet. And then Connecticut and Maduro, both mellow, smooth, easy. And with that Maduro, just a little bit of that bitter sweetness. It's a 4x34. So it's just, right now it's February. It snowed last week. It snowed today. It's cold outside. Now, I do consider cigars a hobby, not a habit. But I also recognize that people want to enjoy the hobby even when it's cold out, and not everyone has a place to do it
Right.
comfortably. So these offer the full experience of a cigar, just with slightly less time so your fingers don't freeze.
Right.
100% tobacco. We don't use any homogenized tobacco like most cigars do this size. These are made entirely by hand. So they really, really stand out in the world of smaller cigars. They are the smallest large handmade cigar.
They're the most premium smaller cigars.
I think so. And across both products, they're all priced in keeping with Ferio Tego's style. They're all priced competitively within the competitive landscape of like products. They're just more premium versions and a more premium experience for the same price.
I might have to pick up some of those. This
They're
weather
so
is
good.
this weather's killing me, and I have no place to go at my house. But sometimes I'm just dying to smoke something. And you know what? I gotta say, from back in my store days to now, I enjoy an occasional Host, man. Like with the sweet tip.
I had one on the way here.
Yeah, right. Like they're that's a cigar. Like I don't smoke like this anymore. But like if I was at a barbecue, like an all day event, I could have 4 or 5 of those things. Like they're so easy and nice, and the flavor's great.
I think
the
for
combustion's
Host,
good.
Host is important for a couple reasons. Number one, who doesn't love a little sweet?
Right.
I drink coffee black all day, But once, like I have a Cuban coffee in Miami. I love it. I don't say no sugar. I drink it because it's occasional and I love it. I don't have a lot of dessert, but if there's dessert, I'm going to have a piece
Yeah, if you're
because
at a
it's
nice
delicious.
restaurant, you're gonna get a
Bring
little
it on.
slicey. Exactly.
So it does serve that purpose, but it also really serves an important purpose for those consumers who enjoy a lot of infused or flavored cigars, even some sweet caps that are a slightly lower quality from a manufacturing standpoint. This also is the perfect invitation to start enjoying more traditional premium handmade cigars without any infusion or flavoring. So that sweetness only exists here. It never transfers to the palate, and it also dissipates about halfway through.
Yeah. No, it's a perfect like that transitionary cigar, which
So good.
I think is really important. Michael, as always, you've
Thank you.
been an absolute inspiration.
Appreciate you having
Thank
me
you.
on.
Please, our pleasure. Anytime you're around, you're around.
That's true.
10
We're
miles
local.
from
You
here.
can't smoke in your house, come smoke at mine.
Exactly. I'll be there. I'll play some drums.
Good.
But thank you so much. Always an absolute pleasure. Guys, make sure to check out Ferio Tego. All of their great lines are available right now. Check out Mike. I know you're always around. Busiest man in the business, always at different events around the country doing everything. Check out the new fresh packs. I'm sure either available on our website or shortly will be. I got to talk with our buyers about that. But thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And as always, keep it lit.